Hi everyone, it's me, Nick, the Jaded book burner. I don't actually burn books yet, but I might today. It has been so long since I last uploaded a video. Just a ton of stuff has happened. I'm trying to look for a new home and stuff like that and everything. It's been a lot, you know what? And so I'm just gonna get straight to the point. This is actually gonna be a video for two books. I tried to do one for one earlier, but I just couldn't. People kept interrupting. So, I am going to be reviewing two classic sci-fi novels, and they are The Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Robert Heinlein and The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. Doing two for one because I don't have any other time and my dog is now looking out the window. Please do not get in a tizzy. Sorry if the quality is bad on this video. It's gray out, natural light, man-made light cannot help me. So anyway, let's get into this. The Moon is a Harsh Mistress is by Robert A. Heinlein, as you can see. And it takes place in the very far future where Earth has become a society for prisoners of Earth and their descendants. And one young man, Manuel or Manny, gets embroiled in a attempt for the lunar colony to be free from Earth's control. And this is mostly, it's basically a revolution, and this is mostly discussing Robert Heinlein's libertarian economics and stuff like that. And this was my first Robert Heinlein, and I'm going to be honest, I didn't like it. And it really has not aged well. There were two things about this that I did kind of like. One, Manny, everyone in this book, everyone on the lunar colony is mixed race, including Manny. He has some Russian ancestry, and he speaks like the book, the way it's narrated, it's in his voice, first person. And it's narrated with someone with like a Russian accent or whatnot. And Russian language, I believe it lacks the articles like you would in Spanish, like la luna, the moon. Like, there's no like Russian version of la or the, I guess. So he speaks like that, and it was a little bit jarring at first, but it was still fairly readable. The other thing I liked is I think it had a strong beginning. In the beginning, Manny meets Mycroft, or Mike as he calls him, which is this supercomputer who him and the later rebels used to help fund their mission, well, not fund, but, help control their mission to revolt against Earth. And Mycroft, or Mike, he's just such an inquisitive little computer. He really likes Manny as a friend. He thinks all other humans are bad until he meets a few other characters. Wyoming, who she is, we can talk about her in a bit. She is one of the loony, they're called loonies, rebels, and the professor. And in the beginning, we meet Mycroft and Manny, and we see how close they are, even though Manny really does not think Mike is a person because he's a computer. And in the beginning, he goes to a rally where he meets Wyoming, who she is from a different city on Luna, and meets up with the professor. And they're at a rally like, hey, we're going to finally overthrow the Earth. And then a fight comes involved from the Lunar Society Dragoons, which are basically like the Earth has in place them as a police force. And they shoot up the place, and, Manny and Wyoming and the professor escape. I think the professor was there, or they later meet up with him. But they escape, and then they go to this motel. And that is where the book quickly declines. They spend 4 chapters in that hotel room discussing economics and politics. And, oh my God, it was just 4 chapters of them. Hi, Duncan, my dog. 4 chapters of them sitting in that room and discussing stuff. And although I said that I like this prose, the Russian style English speaking, the one major problem with this is that, again, it's first person, which isn't the problem, but it's first person past tense. Basically, Manny is mostly summarizing the things that happen. He's doing a lot of telling, not showing. He tells us about certain skirmishes that the rebels do. He tells us about certain battles that the rebels get into with the dragoons and who dies. But he doesn't show. Like, he talks about how Mike behind the scenes is using the phone lines of the lunar colony to, convince people that he is a real person and to bring them to their cause. But it's just summary. It just, I found myself skimming a lot. And the political and economic parts, I'm not that knowledgeable on economics. The only knowledge of economics I have is that I want money. The thing is, the only one time I understood is when there's a part where Manny and the professor, they go to Earth to discuss with the Earth powers there about their situation on Luna. And they basically say, we're not going to pay, for something that the government does that we don't want to do. That I can understand. That's pretty simple. And then there is the stuff that did not age well. It mostly deals with race and women. So, just be prepared for the stuff I'm about to say. Everyone on Luna is mixed race. Manny is part Asian, part Russian, part Latino, because I believe his name is Manuel, and he's got Garcia in his name. And Wyoming, she is blonde and fair skin, but she's from lunar Hong Kong, which was founded by Chinese immigrants or descendants of Chinese prisoners. And so I believe she has Asian in her as well. But there is a part in the book where it's after the initial bar scene where they have to scatter. Wyoming got caught on camera, so she has to hide herself. And remember, she's fair-skinned and blonde-haired. And so what happens is that she gets a skin pigment thing and hair dye where she changes her hair to black and then makes it slightly curly. Then she changes her skin color to a kind of light brown. I believe they said in the book that she looked, quote, Afro, but not quite. And then, unquote. She does this temporarily for a bit, but then she goes back to her fair skin. But then, later on in the book, Wyoming meets with Manny's family. And Lunar Society, it's a polygamous society. Multiple husbands for one wife. I think it's polyandry, I'm not sure. But multiple spouses for a wife. Male spouses. And one of Manny's co-wives through another man that his chief wife is married to, she runs a salon where she eventually gets intel for the revolution and stuff. And she gets Wyoming to go back to her dark hair and dark skin for a bit. And she's described as having Tamil features, or Tamil. I believe it's pronounced Tamil, I'm sorry. And Tamil, for those who don't know, that is a southern Indian ethnicity group. So they made a white woman, dark skin with mixed features? And then Manny's chief wife, I think her name was Mimi, she's like, her real blonde form is a lot prettier, but she doesn't look half bad as this. And then when Wyoming is in that dark skin, dark haired appearance, all the men in Luna are just whistling at her and they're turning their heads at her, which I don't know if Robert Heinlein was just trying to say that, hey, white women aren't the only pretty ones, but that wasn't the best way to do it. And making someone mixed race or having a character that's mixed race does not make that a good thing. And then Wyoming does go back to her blonde hair and fair skin permanently at the end, but one of Manny's other wives, she goes, and I quote, "I wish she would go back to being a brownie so that I could be the prettiest blonde again," unquote. And that's not even the most controversial part of this. Let's get to the women. The BookTube Goddess has discussed this with me before, and I do agree with her. Robert Heinlein, I don't think he actually hated women. I think he was, mesmerized by women. I think he respected women. But he kind of, mystified them, and, in that way, kind of, in that mystification, he kind of made them less human. Um, and a friend of mine on Goodreads she said that, Robert Heinlein was probably just a product of his time, and I mean, yeah, he probably was, but, I don't like using that as an excuse for people's behaviors on race and gender, because there's always been people in certain time periods who rejected those ideas. But let's just get into the women. First of all, Wyoming. Starting from that initial scene where she's in the motel with Manny and the professor, every single idea she shoots up is immediately knocked down as wrong. It pretty much goes like this. Hey, Manny, Professor, I have an idea. No. Okay. Like, any idea she had was, like, immediately shot down. But she was the only woman that happened to. And she did help with the revolution, so a mixed bag. There is a little girl, Hazel, who she actually appears as an older woman in one of Heinlein's juveniles. Get which one that was called. But she's like a little spunky powerhouse, but at one point Heinlein describes her as having little girl curves, which did not sit well with me. And then there is Ludmilla, who is one of Manny's co-wives, who she gets married and pregnant at 16. And then, there's Mimi, Manny's main wife. I actually kind of liked her. She was pretty kind of spunky too. She didn't take anyone's shit, but she was very much on the sidelines. And then there was a scene in the book where one of the female lunar revolutionaries got shot and died, but Heinlein describes her, and I quote, the bullet going through her little girl breast. My dog sat up at that. Even he's disgusted. End quote. Maybe Heinlein was just trying to intentionally push people's buttons. I don't know. I don't know. But that's not even the biggest thing. Oh no, that wasn't the biggest thing. There is a man in the book named Stuart. And he is actually from Earth, and he comes to Luna later. And later on, and this is where Heinlein discusses the, issue of rape in Luna society. Stuart, at one point, gropes a Luna woman, and then a whole bunch of Luna men gang up on him and are ready to beat the shit out of him. And Manny and the professor say, like, hey, he doesn't know how to act here. Just leave him alone, because that clearly justifies a man not getting beat up. And the thing is, at this point, Heinlein says that in Luna society, there is no rape. Because the men there really respect the women, but also because women are a rare find there. They're almost treated like a commodity. So no man would think of raping a woman because they're just too precious. And, like, at the one time, it's like, hey, we must defend women and not rape them, which that's very bare minimum. And at the same time, it's like, hey, you're a rare resource. You can't be raped. And that's not the worst part of it. Eventually, Manny and the professor go back to Earth with Stuart. And Manny and the professor are immediately hospitalized because, and this I actually found cool, the air pressure changes from the moon to Earth, so they had to adjust. And the professor, he took it really badly because of how old he was. That was actually kind of cool. But when they're in India, a nurse who is checking on Manny gets spanked by Stuart, and she just wiggles her butt in response. And according to Heinlein, or maybe Manny, both, it's because Earth women are basically hoes. Luna women, they respect themselves. Y'all Earth girls, y'all hoes. Please, I don't actually mean that. Please don't cancel me. What could have been a good story about revolution and with actual good science and politics just fell apart, like, horribly. I gave this 2 out of 5 stars on Goodreads just because, again, the initial setup and things like that. But my God, I hope to read actually more Heinlein. I've heard his juveniles are pretty good, and don't have this much bad in it. I will be reading in the near future Stranger in a Strange Land, and that's either going to be horrible or great. I know the BookTube goddess loved it as when she read it when she was younger, but oh my God, like, and I will probably read Friday and To Sail Beyond the Moon and, hate myself for it. But yeah, 2 stars. The next book I read was a little bit better, not great, but it is the award-winning, everyone's been talking about this, everyone praises this author, The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. I first heard about this book in college when one of my philosophy professors, we were going over gender, and she talked about this book because of how people change their gender. What this book is about, it's set in Le Guin's Heinisch cycle. Basically just a series of books set around a set of planets set in the far future. A human man named Genli I comes to the planet Gethin. Genthin? It's called Winter, but it's also called... Yeah, Gethin. And he's there because he's a part of the Ecumenon, which is this galactic alliance of worlds to make things better, I guess. And he goes to Gethin to make an alliance and bring them into the Ecumen. And in there, he has a culture clash with the native Gethins. Because the Gethins, the word that Le Guin uses is ambisexual or bisexual. And this is referring to their gender, which this shows you just how the era it is in. Before bisexual and bisexuality referred to a sexual orientation, it referred to gender. But that changed slightly thanks to Sigmund Freud. So that is one thing that does kind of date it. It may confuse some newer readers. Which that is technically a product of its time. But the Gethin, they have like a mixture of masculine and feminine features, or like none in a mixture of one. They enter a period, like, I think it's like once out of the year or once every month, called Kemmer. And that it is when they are able to be fertile, and one Gethin can become more like a woman, and one Gethin can become more like a man, and they can come together and procreate. And this really disturbs Genli I, especially with Estraven. I believe that's his name. Yeah, Estraven. Not estrogen, Estraven. Who is basically his guide on Gethin. Genli is really put off by this culture and everything. And I guess partially it's the reason is just I think it's implied that he is supposed to be misogynistic, and that's why. But eventually, Estraven is forced to flee because he is marked as a traitor in his kingdom on Gethin for, I believe he had he committed incest with someone in his family. I believe that's it. And I believe because a rival in the court also believed he was trying to get Genli to go to another kingdom on the planet to sell it to Ecumen, and he got jealous. But anyway, Estraven leaves, and then Genli leaves, and the two eventually meet up after trial and error. This one was better than The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. And I understand that Le Guin was writing for her time, and this book was considered groundbreaking, but there's some faulty things with it. First of all, I do want to say the world building in this is phenomenal. Like, she goes over everything. The technology, the culture, the environment. Like, nothing is left unturned. And I really enjoyed its message of empathy. Like, how we need to understand each other in order to progress forward and do anything. And I like that she did it without being ham-fisted or beating me over the head with it. Her philosophy comes apart in places, though, and this does concern the gender stuff. Throughout the book, Genli expresses aversion to Kemmer and stuff, because I think at several points, some of the Gethin do try to mate with him, or not try to mate with him, but, like, are attracted to him, and he's just like, no, I don't want to do this. the one thing we learn, and this is where the title of the book comes from, is that Le Guin was influenced by Taoism, which is where that yin and yang symbol comes from. And the idea is, the left hand of darkness and the right hand of light. The left hand of darkness is light, and darkness is the right hand of light. Man and woman, masculinity and femininity come together, united to do something. And I'm sure that was a beautiful message for its time, but it's not... It reinforces the idea that man and woman are in a dualistic relationship with each other. And that's not something we should be doing. Men do not make up what women is not, and women do not make up what men are not. And it's also a bit binary. And someone on Twitter told me that Le Guin was talking about a field that hadn't been touched upon a lot. I disagree with that. People have always been talking about gender and its expressions and stuff. They may not have had the terms gender fluidity or gender spectrum or what have you. Judith Butler may not have been around, but they were still talking about it. Like, in the Middle Ages, there's a romance called Le Roman de Silence, the Romance of Silence, which is about a child that is born a girl named Silentia, but then is baptized and raised as a boy with the name Silentius, but then takes the gender-neutral name Silence. And I can't go too much into it because this video will be longer, but that medieval romance talks about gender as well. People have always been talking about gender. So to say that she was talking about a field that wasn't really developed is a bit of a misclaim. And the other issue is there were other female writers at this time, or feminist writers, women writers, who were talking about how their destiny should not be relied on men, even if they should work together with men. Tanith Lee, Joanna Russ, who didn't even want to work with men. Like, her book, The Female Man, is pretty much the epitome of feminist rage. But yes, men and women should work together to make things better, but their destinies are not entwined together. It's a nice idea, but it doesn't work. And there's also a few other parts of her philosophy that don't work. She claims that, the Gethans have no war, very little to no war, because they're so relaxed about gender. Being relaxed about gender will not solve our issues with aggression and war. Okay, the patriarchy might dissemble or something like that, but no, there's so many other factors in human society that relate to our struggles. Race, poverty, money, that won't work, I'm sorry. And the other thing is that gender, whether you think it's essential or socially constructed, fluid, whatever, it's too entangled in human society for us to ever get away from it. I'm not saying that to be nihilistic, but it's just such a heavy discussed topic and so imprinted in our society, I don't think it's ever going to go away. And then there's some other philosophical points that don't make sense. At one point in the book, a character says, if it is proven there is no God, there will be no religion anymore, which makes sense. But then they also say, if it is proven that there is a God, religion will still go away. That doesn't make sense. I think religions would feel validated that, hey, God, there is proof that God exists, and they would probably get more proselytizing. A friend of mine on GoodReads said that Le Guin was talking about knowledge of God. Once you have knowledge that there is or is not a God or gods, certain things will relax, maybe, again. But I don't buy it. I'm not saying Le Guin is a bad writer. I liked her prose. But her philosophy has a lot of holes in it, and she trips up over it. And another friend on Twitter pointed out, and I know Le Guin was probably pro-LGBT+. As far as I know, she never said anything bad about queer people or anything. But the book does feel like she's treating queerness as an experiment. And I do have to agree with that. And there have been other sci-fi writers that do this, where they'll have aliens who have multiple genders, but never the humans. And it comes off well. It starts off well-intended, but it doesn't age well or come off well. So I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, 3.5, I believe. It was a good attempt, but I think its philosophy has not aged well. And I do want to read more Le Guin. I do want to read the Ursula trilogy. I think it's more than a trilogy. The Ursula books. And I will want to read The Lathe of Heaven or The Lath of Heaven. I do want to read more Le Guin. So I read those 2 books for my resolution to read classic sci-fi. Next, I'm currently reading Ruin and Rising and to finish up the Grisha trilogy, because that's coming up on Netflix. So, and then after that, I will read The Bone Shard's Daughter, and then I will get into Stranger in a Strange Land. I will be I cannot speak. I will be ordering Joanna Russ's The Female Man next, and then hopefully Sci-Teen. But I will have other books to get through that. So, if you've read The Moon is a Harsh Mistress and The Left Hand of Darkness, please tell me what you thought. Do you think it's aged well? Do you think it was just good for its time? Do you love it? Like it? If you like what you see here in this video, ring that bell, hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.